My name is Prince Omar bin Khalid Al Saud, High Prince of the House, steward of revenues that could drown small nations. I move through a world of marble and glass, of jet engines and whispered titles, and men twice your age lower their eyes when I pass. You cannot picture my wealth. You think you can, but you cannot. Your numbers end where my pocket money begins. There are entire islands I have forgotten I own. Aircraft bought and flown, once then left to sleep in private hangars. Apartments in London, Paris, New York, that I have not visited in years, and yet the staff still wait, just in case I decide, on a whim, to open a door. In public, I am power wrapped in fabric and gold. When I walk into a room, conversations shatter into silence. Security scans every corner before I even arrive. Motorcades split traffic like the sea, black cars, tinted windows, armored doors that shut out your world, mine gliding above it. I eat where presidents eat, but they do not sit at the head of the table. I do. I make a gesture, and a deal worth billions changes hands. I grow bored, and entire teams in other countries lose their jobs because a line in a contract no longer pleases me. My days begin in palaces most of you only see on screens. Polished marble so smooth my reflection stares back at me from the floor. Crystal chandeliers that hang like frozen rainstorms above my head. Fountains that spill into pools I never swim in. Gardens that drink more water than your whole village. I wake to fresh coffee placed beside my bed by a man who has worked for my family longer than I have been alive. I step out onto balconies where the city lies below me like a map, and I feel as if I am standing outside the world, looking down on it, rearranging it with a thought. Private jets wait on runways with engines already humming. Because a prince like me does not wait for the world waits for me. I decide at breakfast that I am tired of the heat. By lunch, I am eating in a restaurant on the Mediterranean. By evening, I am back under my own sky, as if gravity itself bends for my schedule. On the tarmac, officials line up, smiles sharp, hands slightly sweaty, each of them bowing a little too low, their words soaked in flattery. I pretend not to notice, but I drink it, I inhale it. It is the air I learned to breathe. Respect, submission, fear. They follow me like shadows. In the mosques, imams choose their phrases carefully when I am present. In the ministries, men check and recheck their reports, terrified that a misplaced comma could cost them everything. In hotels abroad, entire floors are cleared, the best linens, the quietest corners, security woven through every hallway. All of it for me, for my title, for the blood in my veins. When I enter, men stand. When I leave, they watch the door, as if something holy has departed. From the outside, my life is a golden tale, a story mothers use to comfort themselves. Somewhere, there are palaces, there are princes, there is luxury beyond imagination. They do not see what sits beneath the marble, buried under the gold. They see my cars, my watches, my convoys, my perfect photographs with world leaders, and they say, "He is free. He can do anything." They could not be more wrong. In the middle of this glittering prison, there is one thing that did not feel purchased, did not feel arranged for a signature. My wife, my Fatima. Even saying her name, my chest tightens. She is not like the others, not like the pale socialites with painted smiles, not like the daughters traded between families like rare horses to seal alliances. In a world where everything is transaction, she came to me like water in the desert. I met her first at a charity event. At least that is the official story. The truth is more complicated. But let me hold that back for a moment. She moved through the room without trying to be seen, which is precisely why every eye followed her. While other women displayed themselves like jewelry in a glass case, she seemed almost unaware of her own beauty. Or perhaps she simply refused to use it as a weapon. Her abaya flowed dark and simple. Her face mostly veiled, but her eyes, those eyes, they were clear, steady, startlingly alive. I remember standing at the edge of the hall, my usual circle of princes, ministers, businessmen pressing close, voices buzzing in my ears about contracts and strategies, and across the sea of suits and silk, I saw her laugh, softly, at something an older woman had said. Her hand went to her chest, head tilted slightly back, the motion so unguarded, so genuine, that the noise around me dimmed. For a moment, I did not feel like a prince. I felt like a man watching the first drop of rain hit dry ground. Her name was Fatima. Princess Fatima when the papers announced our engagement. But to me she became something much more dangerous, much more sacred. She was the only part of my life that did not feel scripted by ancient men in dark rooms. The marriage was blessed by the elders, yes, but in the quiet spaces, when it was just us, it felt like the first decision I had made for my own heart. Not for the family, not for the tribe, not for the dynasty. She listened when I spoke, not because she feared me, but because she cared. She asked questions no one else dared ask. "Are you happy, Omar?" she would say, in the stillness of our bedroom, silk curtains shifting with the air conditioning, the city humming far below, and I would answer with some half-truth about duty, about responsibility, because the real answer, that my life was a performance I had long grown tired of, would have broken the mask I was born wearing. Her presence changed even the palace. The halls that had echoed with negotiations and arguments began to carry the softer sounds of her, the rustle of her steps, the whisper of her prayers, the distant echo of her laughter with the staff. She spoke gently to the maids, remembered the names of security guards, sent food from our table to the kitchen workers who would otherwise eat what we left behind. When she did this, something inside me both recoiled and reached out. I had been raised to believe kindness was weakness, yet seeing it in her made me hungry in a way power never had. She was my oasis. That is the only word that fits. In a desert of expectations, rituals, alliances, duties, she was a small, green, living place where I could lower my shoulders for a moment, where the prince could fade and the man could, almost, breathe. I would lie beside her at night, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, the faint glow of her phone screen on her face when she read, and think, if I lose everything else, let them take the jets, the palaces, the meetings, but not this, not her. But power in my world is never as simple as it appears from a distance. The golden light hides long shadows, and in those shadows, there are things older than our ministries, older than our king, older even than the kingdom itself. There are vows whispered before microphones existed, promises made over campfires when our grandfathers still moved with the herds, blood pacts, curses if you want to use that word, that crawl through our family line like veins under skin. From childhood, I knew there were rooms in our houses where children did not go, stories that began with long ago and ended abruptly when a young boy like me leaned in too close. I learned early that some names were spoken only in certain tones, with a certain caution, that some smiles from certain uncles never reached their eyes, that some laughter hid teeth. Among those shadows, his name hangs like a blade above my life. My cousin. You do not need his full name. Just know that when it is spoken in our chambers, something inside me tightens, even now. He is older than me by some years, but somehow always outside of the normal lines of respect. Indulged, feared, never truly restrained. As boys, I watched him hurt smaller children, animals, and then stand, calm, while the elders frowned and did nothing. Their silence taught me something terrible, that there were parts of our house that even our rules did not touch. When I grew into my role, when I began to sit in the higher councils, the whispers about old agreements grew louder, not in words, but in the glances passed between men with white beards and ringed hands. 5, 10 of them at a time, drinking coffee in private salons, their voices dropping when I entered, then brightening with false warmth. I learned to hate that sudden change in tone, the way they would say, "Omar, my son," with smiles that never quite reached the bottom of their eyes. There is a secret woven into my branch of the family, something dark, something that tastes of sand and old blood. I will not yet tell you all of it. My throat is not ready. But know this, it is tied to alliances, to keeping certain cousins close, closer than any normal bond would allow. It is dressed in the language of honor, of necessity, of what must be done so that we remain strong. But underneath those words, there is rot. There is an agreement that no man with a clean soul would accept. As my marriage to Fatima drew near, I began to feel that shadow move again, like a snake waking under warm stone. Every time my cousin's name was mentioned in a meeting, in a casual story, at a wedding, my heart lurched in my chest, not from respect, but from something uglier, a memory of being 16, of overhearing 2 elders say, "When his time comes, he will do as the others did, whether he loves her or not. The blood bond must hold." And then noticing me in the doorway, their conversation slicing off into meaningless talk about camels and land. For years, I pushed it away. I buried myself in work, in travel, in the public theater of power. I told myself the old stories were stories, that modern men like us did not do such things anymore, that the whispers about what my grandfather had allowed, what my uncle had endured, were distorted by gossip, superstition, envy. When anxiety clawed at my stomach in the quiet, I silenced it with excess. More flights, more deals, more distractions, more nights spent in other cities with other, temporary comforts. But fear, real fear, does not disappear because you pour money over it. Whenever the elders summoned me, a coldness spread through my body. My phone would vibrate, a simple message from my senior advisor. The Council of Uncles requests your presence tomorrow at 8. And my facade would stiffen. My fingers would tighten around the device. My mouth would form the polite reply. Of course, tell them I will be honored to attend. While inside, a small boy pounded on the walls of my chest, screaming no. I am a man who orders security services, who can make people vanish from public life with one call. And yet, the idea of saying no to those elders made my palms sweat. They are the ones who chose kings before I was born, the ones who kept secrets when coups were whispered about, the ones who know stories that could shatter the image of our house if they wished. Against them, even a prince can feel small. After I married Fatima, the summons began to carry a different flavor. At first, it was small. Come, let us bless your union, they said. We will advise you, guide you. And I went, because that is what we do. I sat in rooms where incense burned heavy and old men praised her beauty in ways that made my jaw tense. She is pure, they said. Untouched, obedient, this is good. Their words crawled over my skin like ants. Each time my cousin's name slipped into the conversation, it was like a knife brushing against my ribs from the inside. Your cousin sends his greetings, one of them would say, eyes flicking to mine. He says he is happy for your joy. And in my mind, behind my composed smile, there was always the same picture, him, watching, waiting, amused, aware of a script I could feel but not yet read. The day came, sooner than I had hoped, when illusion and shadow finally stepped into the same room. It was late afternoon, the kind of washed-out light that makes the palace corridors feel like tunnels of pale gold. I was in my private office, high above the city, glass on 3 sides, the skyline spreading out like a field of steel and sand. Papers lay on my desk, contracts unsigned, reports unread. Fatima had left an hour earlier to meet with a designer about some charity gala. Her perfume lingered in the air, a soft, clean scent that tried, and failed, to drown the stiffness in my shoulders. My phone buzzed. Once, twice, persistent. The screen lit up with a name I could not ignore, one of the eldest of the elders, a man whose word had bent the course of our family more than once. I stared at the call for a second too long, as if by not answering I could freeze time, keep the moment from solidifying into reality. But the world does not pause for cowards, even royal ones. I accepted the call, my voice automatically settling into its practiced calm. Peace be upon you, uncle, I said. And upon you, my son. His voice replied, warm, heavy, like honey poured over a knife. There were a few pleasantries, talk of health, of how busy I was, of Fatima's grace and how proud the family was. Each word felt like a hand on my back, guiding me toward a door I did not want to open. Then his tone shifted, just slightly, but enough that my fingers tightened around the phone. Omar, he said, and the way he said my name made the air in the room thicken. The Council of Elders will gather tonight, after Aisha. We require your presence. There is a matter of tradition to be discussed, concerning your new household and our alliances. My throat went dry. I looked out at the city, all that concrete and light below me, the roads clogged with people who would move aside if they saw my convoy, and I felt smaller than any of them. I knew, with a deep, sick certainty that did not come from logic, that this was the call I had feared since I first let myself love Fatima. The old stories, the half-heard sentences, the whispers about sharing, about binding cousins through the bodies of wives, rushed up from the depths of my memory like black water. I forced my voice not to shake. Of course, uncle, I said, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. I will be there. And as I ended the call, standing alone in a glass tower that the world believed belonged to me. All the jets, all the palaces, all the bowed heads, felt like nothing. Paper. Illusion. Because I knew, when night fell, I would walk into a room where my title meant less than the blood pact written long before I was born, and they were about to demand from me something that would tear my soul in two. When night fell, the palace changed its skin. From the outside it was the same white stone, the same guarded gates, the same fountains whispering in the courtyards. But inside, in a private wing where most of the household never walked, another kind of world waited for me. Older, darker, untouched by the modern lights of the city outside. The Majlis of the Elders was not in the main reception hall, not in the glossy room where I met ministers and foreign delegations. No, this was deeper. A room that carried the weight of decades, of decisions taken before I was born. The corridor leading to it was dim, lit by wall lamps that turned the air a soft amber. My footsteps sounded too loud, even on thick carpets, and with each step my chest grew tighter, as if the air itself resisted my arrival. When I reached the door, the guard standing there did not look at me directly. His head dipped, his hand moved to open the heavy wood, and a wave of scent hit me even before I crossed the threshold. Oud, thick and sweet, burned in old brass burners along the walls, swallowing the room in smoke that curled and clung to everything. It mixed with the darker smell of tobacco, that heavy, male scent of old men who have spent their lives exhaling decisions others die for. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me with a soft, final sound. The room was long, low, lined with cushions and deep sofas against the walls. The carpet beneath my feet was dark, patterned with shapes that seemed to move when I glanced at them too quickly. On the low tables, small cups of coffee and tea sat half-finished, dates glistening with syrup, untouched plates of sweets. A television in the corner was turned off, its black screen reflecting a blurred version of the men already gathered. The air was thick, almost chewable. Smoke from the oud and cigarettes hung in layers, turning every beam of light into a solid shaft. I breathed in, and it felt like swallowing someone else's memories, like inhaling all the conversations that had ever passed through this place. My lungs protested, but I did not cough. A prince does not cough in front of these men. They were already seated. The elders, my uncles, great-uncles, a few older cousins whose hair had gone white, but whose eyes remained sharp. They sat in a loose horseshoe along the walls, their robes immaculate, their ogles resting perfectly on their headscarves. Their faces were carved with time, lines running deep from years of frowning, laughing, plotting. Some held prayer beads, fingers moving slowly over each stone, not in devotion, but in habit. A few looked up as I entered. Others kept their gaze on their cups, but I felt all of them register my presence, the way predators sense when another animal has stepped onto their ground. "Peace be upon you," I said, voice steady, but inside my ribs, something trembled. "And upon you peace, Omar, my son," came the chorus. A blend of voices, some warm, some cool. The eldest among them, the one who had called me, sat at the center, on a slightly raised cushion that almost made a throne without calling itself one. His beard was white, his eyebrows thick, his eyes dark and undimmed by age. When he looked at me, it was as if he saw not just the man I was, but the boy I had been, and the promises made over my head when I was too small to understand. I moved to the place indicated with a small gesture of his hand, not at the center, not at the edge, but somewhere in between, close enough to hear every breath, far enough that I had to lean forward to catch every word. A young man I did not recognize poured coffee into a tiny cup and offered it to me. I took it with my right hand, fingers steady because I forced them to be. The liquid was hot, bitter, strong. I barely tasted it, but I swallowed, because refusing it would have been its own kind of statement. And tonight I wanted no statements that were not carefully calculated. And then I saw him. Prince Malik, my cousin, was already there. Of course, he sat casually along the right wall, one leg slightly stretched, ankle resting on his knee, as if this were his living room and not the den of the men who could unmake us both with a word. His robe was immaculate, his watch expensive and carelessly visible, his hair trimmed close, a hint of gray at his temples that only made him look more dangerous, more seasoned. When our eyes met, his mouth curved into a smile, The kind that would have looked friendly to someone who did not know him. To me, it was a baring of teeth. He lifted his small coffee cup in my direction, a mock toast, then took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact. There was a gleam there, amusement, anticipation, the relaxed confidence of a man who already knows the script of the evening and is enjoying watching me catch up. He said my name softly, Omar, like we were boys again, sneaking away from tutors. But there was nothing boyish in the way his gaze slid over me, measuring, weighing, lingering just a fraction too long when he mentioned Fatima's name in earlier weeks. Your wife is very beautiful, he had said once during a family lunch, his tone polite, his eyes anything but. That same unspoken hunger flickered now, behind the politeness, behind the feigned brotherhood. I forced myself to nod. The appropriate small gesture. Nothing more, nothing less. Malik, I answered. My voice did not betray the urge rising in my throat, the urge to cross the room, to grab his face in my hands and slam it into the glass of the low table until that smile disappeared forever. The elders spoke of other things first. That was their way, never walking straight to the wound. They asked about the king's health, about a recent meeting I had attended with foreign dignitaries, about a development project on the coast. I responded, because I had to. Phrases rolling out of my mouth by reflex, polished sentences I had used so many times they no longer tasted like words. All the while, a deeper conversation played behind their eyes. A silent exchange that told me this was all prelude. The smoke thickened as they talked. Oud burned hotter. Someone lit another cigarette. The combination of scents grew so heavy I could feel it on my skin, sinking into my clothes. My head buzzed slightly, not from any substance, but from pressure, from the low hum of impending doom. The room seemed smaller than when I had entered, the ceiling lower, the walls closer, as if the house itself leaned in to listen. At some unspoken signal, the idle talk thinned. One by one, the elders' gazes converged on the center, on the eldest among them. He set his cup down with a soft clink that sounded final. The beads in his hand stilled. His eyes rose to mine, and for a moment, all the sounds in the room died. The TV in the corner, dark and silent, reflected a tiny version of him sitting there, like another witness. Omar, he began, and my heart, traitor that it is, sank at the way he said my name, heavy, ceremonial, as if reading the opening line of a judgment. You are a son of this house, he continued, voice calm, slow. You have been given much position, trust, the honor of representing us before the world. Each word was true, and yet each word settled on my shoulders like another stone. We have watched you. We have seen you fulfill your duties with dignity. And now, you have taken a wife. His eyes flickered, just for an instant, the smallest smile touching the corner of his mouth. Princess Fatima, may God bless your union. The other elders murmured their assent. May God bless, may he grant you sons. Words that in any other room would have warmed me. But here, now, they felt like knives being gently pressed against my skin, testing where to cut. As you know, he went on, shifting slightly, his robe rustling. Our family is not like others. We do not survive on sentiment, but on strength, on unity, on bonds that are unbreakable. He rolled that last word slowly between his teeth, savoring it. In the desert, long before these walls, before these cities, our grandfathers made agreements, covenants, sealed not only with ink, but with blood. It is because of these that we stand where we stand today, while others have fallen. My mind screamed, I know where this is going. I know. Stop. Stop talking. Stop dressing it in fine language. Say it and let me kill you with my eyes. But my face remained composed. The mask I had worn since childhood refusing to crack. He gestured lightly toward Malik without looking at him. Your cousin, Malik, his branch and yours, have long been bound together, through sacrifice, through sharing what is most precious, so that no jealousy, no division, can set root between you. Some of the men nodded, slowly, as if remembering, or pretending to remember, rituals I had only ever heard hinted at in half-finished stories. The word sharing hit me in the chest like a physical blow. My fingers tightened on my knee, digging into the fabric of my robe. I kept them there, because if I lifted my hands, I did not trust myself not to reach for someone's throat. The old man's gaze sharpened. You know our customs, Omar, he said. You are not a child. You know that when a man of your standing, of your role, takes a wife, she does not belong only to him. She becomes a thread in the greater tapestry, a symbol, a bridge between houses. It has always been so, and it will remain so as long as we breathe. Always. The word echoed in my skull like a curse. Another elder leaned forward, his voice rasping. In your grandfather's time, he allowed this, honored this. Your uncle accepted it, without protest. His eyes bored into mine, daring me to be less obedient than the ghosts they revered. We do not ask you to do anything new, only to stand where they stood, to carry what they carried. For the sake of all. He spread his hands, as if presenting me with an opportunity, not a violation. For the strength of the bloodline. Another added, for the unity of the clan. For the old alliances, came a third. They spoke like a chant, the phrases overlapping, weaving together a net of duty, honor, necessity, around the horror at the center. They were not asking. They were constructing a reality in which refusal did not exist. My throat burned. My mind shouted, say it, say the words. Let me hear how far you will go to clothe filth in holiness. The eldest took a slow breath, eyes never leaving my face. Your wife, he said softly, is beautiful, pure, untouched by the corruption of outside blood. This is a blessing for all of us, not only for you. He paused, letting that sink in. It is fitting, therefore, that this blessing be shared, that no envy grow between you and your cousin, that the bond between your houses be sealed, as it has been sealed before. His language was careful, every word polished, but beneath the careful phrases, the meaning stood naked, obscene. They wanted me to bring my wife, my Fatima, the only pure water in the desert of my life, into this arrangement, into this ancient, demonic tradition. They wanted her body to bear the weight of their alliances, the way other women's bodies had been used in years past. They wanted me, her husband, to stand aside, to watch, or at least to know, and accept, while my cousin took what was mine in the name of unity. Malik shifted slightly on his cushion, and though my eyes did not turn to him, I felt his attention on me like heat. That same thin smile tugged at his mouth, the smile of a man who has been promised something forbidden and is watching the last barriers crumble. He pretended modesty, his gaze down, but there was a glint at the edges, a sick, hungry glitter that made my skin crawl. Rage, pure and white, exploded inside me. In my mind, I leapt across the carpet. I grabbed the brass burner of wood and smashed it into the eldest's face. I gouged out Malik's eyes with my thumbs. I felt the soft give of his flesh, heard the wet sounds of bones breaking under my fists. In the theater behind my eyes, I overturned tables, shattered cups, drowned the old men's fine words in their own blood. I dragged them by their beards across the carpet they defiled with centuries of this filth. I burned down the majlis with them still inside, and stood over the ashes with Fatima's hand in mine, free. That is what my soul did. Inside, my body did nothing. I sat there, perfectly still, like a statue placed in position for decoration. My back straight, my hands resting on my knees, my face a careful mask of respect. The only betrayals were small, almost invisible. The slight tremor at the edge of my thumb, the muscle ticking in my jaw, the way my heartbeat thundered in my ears so loudly I could barely hear their voices. Because beneath the rage, there was terror. These men held more than stories, more than rituals. They held my inheritance, my position, the network of power that kept not only me, but Fatima, safe. If I defied them openly, if I stood up and shouted, "No, this is evil, this is madness," they would not argue theology with me. They would not consider my feelings. They would simply remove me. They could strip me of titles, quietly, politely. They could cut the flow of money that sustained my projects, isolate me in some distant villa, call it rest, retreat. They could spread a whisper that I was unstable, that I had broken under pressure. They could do worse. There are accidents in our world, car crashes on empty roads, sudden illnesses that take a man in his sleep. They had orchestrated more delicate operations than that. I knew it. The way you know the sun will rise, without needing to see the reports. And then there was Fatima herself. Her face flashed before my eyes. The way she looked when she brushed her hair at night, when she read quietly in bed, when she laughed with the kitchen staff. She was soft power, unarmed, undefended except by the walls of my name. If I angered these men, if I humiliated them by saying no, they could reach her, not just through this tradition, but through 1,000 subtle cruelties. They could make her life a cage within a cage, cut her off from everyone, label her disobedient, unworthy. They could force annulments, exile. They could even frame her in some scandal and bury her under shame. I was a prince, but in this room, I was nothing more than a node in their web. The eldest watched me, reading all of this in the silence between my breaths. He did not rush. He let the weight of expectation settle over me, pressing down. The other elders waited as well, some faces cold, some almost sympathetic, but none offering escape. This was not a conversation. It was a sentencing, and they were waiting to see how gracefully I would bow to it. One day, the old man said quietly, almost kindly, "You will sit where I sit, and you will understand that a man cannot think only of himself, or even of his wife. He must think of the blood that flows in his veins, of the name he carries, of the tribe that shelters him. We ask much of you, Omar, but we ask nothing we have not given ourselves. This is duty. This is sacrifice. This is how we remain strong." My lips parted. My tongue moved. The words that came out were not the ones clawing at the inside of my skull. They were the ones the room demanded. "What exactly do you require of me?" I heard myself say. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. A small nod passed among them. Satisfaction. The first crack of victory. The eldest leaned back slightly, as if a great burden had just been lifted from his shoulders and placed onto mine. "You will bring your wife to us," he said. "At the appropriate time. In the appropriate manner. We will guide you. For now. You will understand that your cousin has rights in this matter, as agreed long before either of you were born. You will not resist. You will not poison her mind against what must be done. You will explain to her that this is honor, that this is tradition. Honor." The word dripped like acid into my ears. Across the room, Malik lowered his cup. He looked up, and this time he did not bother to hide the hunger in his eyes. He smiled fully, slow, satisfied. The smoke framed his face, making him look less like a man and more like something that had crawled out of the shadows of our history and put on human skin. Inside me, something broke. Silently. I felt it. The crack. The splintering of the illusion that I was powerful, that I was in control, that all the jets, all the palaces, all the obsequious bows meant anything when measured against the simple fact that I could not protect the one person I truly loved. Not from enemies outside, but from the people who shared my blood. In that moment, I saw myself clearly, not as the world saw me, but as I truly was. A prince, dressed in gold, sitting in a room full of older beasts, unable to move, unable to speak the truth, bound by promises I had never agreed to, a slave to the clan, wrapped in silk chains. And as I sat there, nodding slowly, feeling their satisfaction close around me like a noose, a desperate, wordless cry began to rise in my chest, a cry with no name, no direction, no God to hear it, not yet. The corridor back to my wing felt longer than it ever had in my life, as if the house itself had stretched while I sat in that suffocating room. I moved through my own palace like a stranger, my feet knowing the way, my mind lagging behind. Every step sank into thick carpets that once whispered luxury to me. Now they sounded like padding in a padded cell, soft, silent, designed to swallow any scream before it reached the walls. Servants stepped aside as I passed, as they always did, heads bowed, eyes respectfully lowered. Yet tonight, every lowered gaze felt like accusation, like they saw something clinging to me, a stain, an invisible filth spreading across my clothes. I caught the briefest flicker of a glance from one young attendant, his eyes lifting just for a heartbeat before he forced them down again. In that tiny moment, I wondered, does he know? Do any of them know what happens behind those thick doors when the elders call? Do rumors ripple through the staff like underground water? My security detail followed at a respectful distance, their footsteps synchronized, weapons hidden under immaculate suits. Men who would throw themselves in front of a bullet for me. Men I had sent into danger without blinking. And yet, as I walked, it struck me with brutal clarity. They did not belong to me. Not truly. They belonged to the system, to the clan, to the same network of power that had just handed my wife's dignity over like a bargaining chip. If I turned, grabbed one by the lapels and begged, "Help me," what could he do? What would he dare do? Nothing. Less than nothing. The walls were familiar. Gilded frames holding calligraphy and landscapes. Chandeliers glittering overhead. But the beauty had turned on me, become hostile. The gold leaf on the moldings looked like veins of something rotten crawling through the building. The soft lighting felt interrogational, exposing every crack in my soul. Each doorway I passed seemed to watch me, an eye, a mouth, waiting to swallow me whole. By the time I reached the private wing, my chest felt hollow, my hands were cold. Despite the warmth of the air, a guard opened the final door for me, head bowed. "Good evening, Your Highness," he murmured, as if the evening could still be called good. I nodded. Automatic, my tongue heavy in my mouth. Inside, the atmosphere changed again. Here the ceilings were lower, the lighting softer, the decor chosen as much by Fatima's eye as by the palace designers. A vase of fresh flowers she liked, soft blues and whites, stood on a side table, their scent so delicate, almost lost against the phantom reek of oud and smoke still clinging to my clothes. Her touch was everywhere. The way cushions were arranged, the photos in silver frames, the open book resting on a console, a thin scarf of hers left draped over the back of a chair, as if she had just passed through. For a moment, I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom, unable to move. My hand hovered inches from the door handle. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, the one place where the mask slipped, where the prince could set down his crown and be just a man, a husband. And yet, now, even this door felt like a gate to an execution chamber. Not for me, but for her. For us. She was inside, waiting. I could feel it like a physical pull, like gravity shifted, drawing me toward her. Part of me wanted to turn and run in the opposite direction, to walk out of the palace and keep walking until the desert swallowed me, to never see the question in her eyes, the pain I knew I would find there once she understood. Another part of me, the part that still remembered what it felt like to breathe in her presence, needed her, needed to collapse at her feet and weep until I had no voice left. I opened the door. She was seated on the edge of the bed, veil removed, hair loose around her shoulders, the soft fabric of her dress pooling around her like water. A small lamp beside her cast a warm circle of light, drawing every line of her face into gentle relief. She looked up the moment I entered, and everything in her expression shifted. The easy, welcoming smile she wore when she heard my steps in the corridor died before it reached her lips. Her eyes sharpened, searching my face, walking across it the way I had walked through the palace, looking for damage. "Omar," she said. My name a question, a prayer, a verdict, all at once. I tried to answer, but my throat closed. The words stuck behind a wall of raw pain. I forced myself forward, each step heavier than the last. I could feel my mask cracking, the well-practiced calm falling away piece by piece at her gaze. There is a kind of honesty you cannot escape with someone who has seen you sleeping, sick, laughing, someone who has held you when no one else was watching, in front of the world. I could lie, but not to her. Not completely. She rose as I approached, bare feet touching the carpet with the kind of quiet grace I had always found soothing. Now, it unnerved me, because she seemed untouched by the rot I had just come from. Too pure, too clean. She moved closer, lifting a hand to my face, her fingers hovering just above my cheek as if asking permission. When I didn't pull away, she let them rest there, her palm warm against skin that felt suddenly far too cold. "What did they say?" she whispered. There was fear in her eyes, but also that stubborn strength I had fallen in love with. She already knew it was bad. She just didn't know how monstrous. Yet, I could have lied, said it was politics, some dispute over investments, pressure about foreign policy, anything but the truth. I could have swallowed it, carried it alone, let it eat me from the inside while she slept unaware beside me for a little longer. But the thing they demanded of me was not something I could hide in shadows. It would drag itself into our bed, into our future, whether I consented or not. My knees buckled. Instead of answering, I sank down in front of her, like a man whose strings had been cut. One moment I was standing, the next I was kneeling at her feet, my hands clutching at the fabric of her dress as if it were the only thing keeping me from sinking through the floor. My forehead pressed against her thighs, and for a moment, everything went dark, not because the lights dimmed, but because my eyes flooded. The tears came without my permission. Hot, humiliating, unstoppable. She gasped softly, shocked. I had never knelt before anyone in my life. Not like that. Not in our bedroom. Not with my body shaking like a tree in a storm. Her hands moved immediately, one going to my hair, fingers sliding through it, the other curling around my shoulder, steadying me, the way you hold a man who has been shot and is trying not to fall. Omar, my love. What is it? She whispered, urgency trembling in her voice. You're scaring me. For a long moment, I could not speak. I could only breathe against her. Harsh, broken breaths that sounded like sobs even when I tried to swallow them. My tears soaked into the thin fabric of her dress, into her skin. Her scent washed over me, clean, warm, something faintly floral she favored. It cut me in half. Because this softness, this safety, was what they wanted to defile, to turn into currency. Finally, the words dragged themselves out. Torn, incomplete. They spoke of tradition, I choked out. Of honor, of alliances. My hands tightened on her, fists bunching the cloth. They spoke of sharing. I felt her body still under my forehead. Her fingers, which had been moving gently through my hair, froze, like someone had hit pause. For a heartbeat, she did not breathe. Neither did I. Sharing, she repeated, her voice flat now, distant, like she was standing at the lip of a cliff and staring down. What? What do you mean? Sharing. I lifted my head enough to look up at her, and I wished I had not, because in her eyes I saw fear, dawning, growing, still mixed with disbelief, as if she were begging me to say something else, anything else, to make the horror she was beginning to picture crumble into a misunderstanding. It's an old pact, I managed, my voice raw, between my branch and Malik's. They say it binds us, keeps us united. They call it duty, sacrifice. I swallowed, my mouth dry as sand. They say, my wife, must not be only mine, that he has rights. The word rights nearly tore my tongue out on the way out. Her face went white, all color draining in an instant. Her eyes widened, then flickered away from mine, as if the room itself might offer some denial, some escape route. The hand on my shoulder tightened unconsciously, nails biting through the fabric, anchoring herself to something solid in a world that had just tilted violently under her feet. No, she breathed, barely audible. No, that can't be. Omar, tell me you refused. Her gaze snapped back to mine, burning now, desperate. Tell me you walked out, that you told them no. The words stabbed straight through me, because in my heart, in the storm raging inside, that was exactly what I had done 1,000 times, tearing the room apart, spitting in their faces. But in reality, in that suffocating majlis, I had sat frozen, calculating, terrified. My mouth opened, closed. Shame flooded me, thicker than any smoke, heavier than any gold. I told them I would listen, I confessed, each word an iron hook in my throat. That I would understand my duty. My voice broke completely. They hold everything. Fatima, they can destroy us. They can make you disappear. Make it look like an accident. They can... I couldn't continue. The images were too violent, too vivid. She stared at me, something in her expression collapsing, like a wall that had been holding back a flood suddenly giving way. Pain moved across her face in waves, disbelief, then hurt, then a flicker of anger not at me, but at the invisible hands trying to lay claim to her. So I am. Property, she whispered, tears finally rising in her eyes. A piece of land to be shared. A treaty written on my body. Her laugh was short, sharp, bitter, a sound I had never heard from her before. And you, my prince, with all your power, all your security, all your jets and titles, you cannot stop them. Each word was true. Each word another shard driven into my chest. I bowed my head again, unable to meet her gaze. I am trying to find a way, I insisted weakly, though even as I said it, I knew how hollow it sounded. I will negotiate, delay. There must be. My voice died, because in that moment, stripped bare in front of her, I realized I had been lying to myself, clinging to the fantasy that I could outmaneuver men who had been playing this game since before I was born. She cupped my face, forcing me to look up. Her eyes were wet now, a sheen of tears turning them into mirrors where I saw my own broken reflection. Tell me the truth, she said quietly. If you say no, if we run, what will they do? The answer rose without hesitation, because in some deep place, I had always known. They will kill us, I said. The words fell into the room like stones. Not suddenly, not obviously, but they will. They will call it fate, a crash, an illness, but it will be them. I swallowed, my hands shaking. And even if they do not kill, they will make life worse than death. They will take everything, your freedom, your name. They will say you dishonored the family, and no one will question it. Silence settled between us. Thick, absolute. The palace around us hummed quietly, the air conditioner pushing cold air through vents, a clock ticking softly on the wall. Somewhere far away, a car engine growled in the courtyard, life going on. Indifferent, while our world cracked open on this bed. She drew in a slow, shuddering breath. Her fingers stroked my cheek, almost absent-mindedly, as if soothing a child while her own mind flew elsewhere. And if we comply? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. If we bow, if we let them do this, what happens to us then? I had no answer that wasn't another form of death. Night fell fully while we sat like that, the sky outside our windows darkening until the city lights glowed like a distant constellation. At some point, she slid off the bed to sit on the floor with me, her back against the side, my head in her lap. Her fingers moved in my hair again, slow, mechanical, her gaze fixed on nothing. Both of us trapped in the same nightmare. Awake. Eventually, exhaustion pushed us toward the rituals of sleep, or the mockery of them. She changed in silence, her movements precise, her face blank. I undressed mechanically, each button a small act of war against a body that felt alien to me now. We lay down side by side, the space between us at first too wide, then too narrow as I pulled her close, terrified of even inches, afraid that if I let go, someone would slip between us in the dark and take what little we had left. But sleep did not come. The hours stretched. Every minute a nail hammered into the coffin of the life we thought we had. The clock on the wall clicked with cruel precision, its hands crawling, each movement louder than the last. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, seeing not plaster and patterns, but the faces of the elders. Malik's smile, Fatima's tears, the dead calm in my own eyes reflected in the glass of the Majlis TV. I turned onto my side, then onto my back again, then sat up. Unable to keep still, the sheets felt like restraints, twisted around my legs. I pushed them away, the cool air hitting my skin. I stood, paced from one end of the room to the other, barefoot on the polished floor. My hand brushed the walls as I walked, feeling the smooth paint, the occasional line of cool marble. This had been my fortress. Now it was a cage. Every surface a reminder that I was trapped inside a life owned by others. At one point, my fingers found the solid weight of a decorative brass object on a shelf. Some expensive piece of art, curved and heavy. I lifted it, testing its heft in my hand. For a heartbeat, a clear, savage thought flashed through me. I could use this. I could wait until Malik stepped through our door, until the elders gathered, and then I could swing, hard, again and again. I could paint these walls with their blood. I could choose murder over compliance. My grip tightened, knuckles whitening, muscles in my arm coiled. My heart raced. I saw it, felt it, the shock on their faces, the chaos, the possibility of an escape in the confusion. Then reality crashed back in, cold and merciless. Even if I killed them, even if by some miracle I struck fast enough, hard enough, there were others, always others. The clan was not a handful of old men in one room. It was a network of brothers, cousins, security heads, judges, clerics, all interwoven. If I raised my hand against them, the entire structure would turn on me, on us. There would be no trial, no forgiveness, only a quiet erasure, a story twisted into madness. He lost his mind, they would say. He snapped. He killed his own kin. What a tragedy. And the world would nod, accept, move on. I set the brass object down, carefully, as if it might explode if I dropped it. My hand shook, so violently I had to clench it into a fist against my thigh. I felt weak, smaller than I had ever felt in my life. I, who had walked into international meetings like I owned the planet, now stood in my own bedroom, afraid of the men outside my door. I went to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peer out. The courtyard below was quiet, lit by soft yellow lights. A few guards stood at their posts, motionless, weapons hidden but real. Once, their presence would have made me feel safe, protected. Now, they looked like jailers, their silhouettes cutting my last illusions to pieces. If I ran, they would follow, not to shield me, but to bring me back, behind me. Fatima's voice floated softly. "Come back to bed," she murmured, not because she believed we would sleep, but because she could not bear to see me pacing like a caged animal. I let the curtain fall, shutting out the view, but not the truth, and returned to her, lying down, staring at the darkness above us. My mind raced, searching for exits that did not exist. Could I call a foreign embassy? Seek asylum? Leak the story to the outside world? No. Every call was monitored, every movement watched. Besides, exposing the family would not save us. It would only hasten our deaths. Could I send her away secretly? Forged documents? A hidden car? No. Every gate had eyes. Every border a loyal officer with more allegiance to the house than to me. Slowly, horribly, the realization settled into my bones, heavy, immovable. There was no political way out, no clever maneuver left, no negotiation that could turn this tide. I was not the master of this game. I was a piece on the board, pushed back and forth by hands older and colder than mine. If I refused, if I took a stand and said no with all the force of my rank, they would not debate. They would remove me. Remove us, like a problem solved. The newspapers would print photographs of our smiling faces beside headlines about misfortune, tragedy, fate. The world would mourn politely, send condolences, and never know the truth. If I complied, if I bowed my head and led my wife to their altar of alliances, something in us would die anyway. Not bodies, but souls, trust, love, the very core of who we were. I lay there, feeling her breath against my chest, feeling my own heartbeat hammering under her palm where she rested her hand, and I understood, with a clarity that stole the air from my lungs. I was trapped, not by bars, not by chains of iron, but by blood, by oath, by fear, by a system so complete that even in my own bed, in my own palace, I could find no door, no crack, no way out. So I did the only thing left to a man with no weapons and no choices. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness behind them, with no words, no name, no faith big enough to hold it, my soul, without my permission, began to cry out for help, to someone, to anyone, who could reach deeper than the roots of this cursed family and tear them out. Even if I did not yet believe such a rescue existed, days passed like hours, hours passed like years. Time became meaningless, a cruel joke told by a clock that refused to stop. The elders had given their instructions. 3 days from now, after Maghrib prayers, you will prepare your household. Your cousin will arrive at the appropriate hour. The words had been spoken calmly, as if discussing a dinner invitation, not the destruction of everything I held sacred. I moved through those days like a ghost in my own life, signing papers I did not read, attending meetings where my voice answered questions but my mind was elsewhere, trapped in a nightmare that had no exit. Fatima grew quieter with each passing hour, her eyes hollow, her movements mechanical. We barely spoke, because what words existed that could hold the weight of what was coming? At night we lay together, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck, knowing the water was rising, and there was no land in sight. And then, the night arrived. I remember standing in our bedroom as the sun set, watching the light drain from the sky like blood from a wound. The call to Maghrib prayer echoed across the city. That haunting, beautiful sound that once brought me peace. Now it sounded like a countdown, a tolling bell announcing an execution. Fatima sat on the edge of the bed, dressed as they had instructed, modest but prepared. Her hands were folded in her lap, trembling slightly. Her face was a mask, blank, empty, as if she had already left her body to protect what remained of her soul. I wanted to tell her to run, to scream, to fight, but my mouth would not form the words, because we both knew there was nowhere to run that they could not find us. The palace staff moved with unusual efficiency that evening. Too efficient, as if they had done this before, or been briefed. Rooms were cleared, certain hallways restricted, the guards stationed themselves at new positions, their faces carefully neutral, professionally blind to whatever would unfold behind closed doors. I caught the eye of one, a man who had served my family for years, and saw something flicker there. Pity, shame, or perhaps just relief that it was not his wife, his daughter, his life being fed to the wolves. Then I heard it. The sound of an engine in the courtyard below. Low, powerful, deliberate. A car door opening, then closing with a solid, expensive thunk that echoed off the palace walls. My entire body went rigid, ice flooding my veins. Fatima's head turned toward the window, her breath catching, her hands clutching at the fabric of her dress. Footsteps. They started distant, muffled by carpet and stone, but growing louder with each second, measured, unhurried, the walk of a man who knows he has been given permission, who knows no one will stop him. Each step was a hammer blow to my chest, each one closer, closer. I stood frozen, my feet rooted to the floor, my hands useless at my sides. This could not be happening. This could not be real. And yet the sound of those footsteps was the most real thing I had ever heard. A knock at the outer door of our wing. Soft, almost polite. One of the household staff answered. I heard the murmur of voices, formal greetings, the rustle of fabric, then silence. A terrible, pregnant silence that pressed against my eardrums like water at the bottom of the ocean. The door to our bedroom opened. Not violently, not with force, but slowly, as if whoever stood on the other side wanted to savor the moment. Malik stepped inside, and the air in the room turned to poison. He was dressed impeccably, white thobe pristine, his scent expensive, cologne mixed with the faint smell of tobacco. His face wore that same smile, that thin, satisfied curl of the lips that made my stomach heave. His eyes found Fatima first, sliding over her like hands, lingering, assessing, possessing her with his gaze before he even moved. Then they shifted to me, and in them I saw amusement, triumph, the sick pleasure of a man who knows he is about to take something irreplaceable from someone powerless to stop him. Omar, he said softly, my name in his mouth like a curse. I trust. Everything is as it should be. I could not answer. My throat had closed completely, my jaw locked. If I opened my mouth, I would either vomit or scream, and neither would change what was happening. Behind him, one of the elders appeared in the doorway, an overseer, a witness to ensure compliance. He nodded at me, a small gesture that said, "You know what is expected. Do not shame the family." Malik took a step closer to Fatima, and I felt my body move. Not toward him, but backward, as if pulled by invisible chains. Every instinct I had screamed to put myself between them, to break his face, to die fighting rather than allow this. But my body, trained since birth to obey the structures of power, to calculate survival, betrayed me. My feet shuffled backward, one step, then another. My vision blurred at the edges, the room tilting. "It is time for you to leave," the elder said to me, his voice low, gentle, the tone you use with a child who must take medicine. "There is a room prepared for your comfort. This will not take long. Not take long." The words sliced through me like glass, as if the duration mattered, as if it being quick somehow made it less monstrous. Fatima's eyes found mine, and in them I saw something break, the last fragile thread of hope snapping. She did not speak, did not cry out, but her expression screamed at me. "How can you leave me? How can you let this happen?" And I had no answer, nothing but shame so complete it felt like my skin was being peeled away layer by layer. My legs moved without my permission, carrying me toward the door, past Malik who watched with that infuriating calm, past the elder who placed a hand on my shoulder, guiding, pushing, shepherding me out of my own bedroom like a child being sent away while the adults conducted business. The door closed behind me, not slammed, just closed, with a soft click that sounded like the ceiling of a tomb. I stood in the hallway, staring at that closed door, my whole world on the other side of it, and I felt my knees begin to give way. The walls pressed in, the air too thick, too hot. My chest heaved, gasping, but no oxygen reached my lungs. A sound was building in my throat, animal, desperate. I pressed my fist against my mouth to stop it, biting down on my knuckles until I tasted blood. Move! A voice inside me whispered, "Move or you will collapse here where they can see you." I stumbled down the hallway, away from the bedroom, away from the closed door and the horror unfolding behind it. My shoulder hit the wall, then the other wall, careening like a drunk, my vision swimming. I found a door, a small adjoining room used for storage, supplies, things no one cared about. I pushed inside, slammed it behind me, and twisted the lock with shaking hands. The space was narrow, dark except for a sliver of light from a high window. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with linens, cleaning products, the forgotten debris of palace life. The air smelled of detergent and dust. I took 2 steps, then my legs finally gave out completely. I collapsed, not gracefully, not slowly, but like a building coming down. My knees hit the floor hard, pain shooting up my thighs, but I barely felt it. I pitched forward, catching myself with my hands, my forehead pressing against the cold tile. And then the sound I had been holding back tore out of me. A wail. Raw. Broken. Inhuman. I was a man with billions of dollars. I was a prince. I had flown in private jets and sat across from world leaders and signed my name on documents that moved markets. And I was destroyed. Utterly. Completely destroyed. Reduced to a shaking heap on the floor of a storage room. Powerless. Worthless. Less than nothing. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to block out the images my mind conjured, trying to stop the reel of horror playing behind my eyelids. But it would not stop. I saw her face. I saw his hands. I saw the elder standing there watching, making sure the pact was honored. I saw my own cowardice, my frozen feet, my backward steps, my compliance. No! 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 I choked out, the word repeating like a mantra, like if I said it enough times reality would rewind, undo itself. Please, please. But to whom was I speaking? I had prayed before. The obligatory prayers. The rituals learned as a boy. Words recited in Arabic that rolled off the tongue like memorized poetry. Empty. Formal. Dutiful. I had never truly prayed. Never truly cried out from a place deeper than language. Deeper than tradition. Now, in the dark, crushed under a weight that had no name, I realized I did not even know how. My mind scrambled, grasping, searching. Allah, I thought, but the name felt distant, formal, wrapped in too many rules and intermediaries, bound to the same structures that had brought me here. The elders prayed to Allah. Malik prayed to Allah. The men who had just handed my wife over like currency. They all prayed 5 times a day and considered themselves righteous. Then, from some buried corner of my memory, a fragment surfaced. A conversation, years ago, with a foreign diplomat. A Christian man who had been kind when he did not need to be. We had spoken late one night about faith, about the differences between our worlds, and he had said something that stayed with me though I had dismissed it at the time. When I run out of options, when the world has no answers, I call on Jesus, because he is the God of the impossible. The God of the impossible. I had laughed then, mocked it in my heart as weakness. But now I had nothing left. No options, no clever strategies, no power that meant anything. I was at the end of every road I knew. My lips moved, cracked, dry. Jesus. I whispered into the dark. The name felt strange, foreign on my tongue, like speaking a language I had never learned. Jesus, if you are real. My voice broke, the words dissolving into sobs, but I forced them out. If you are who they say you are, the God of the impossible, then prove it. Stop this. Please. I am begging you. Save her. Save us. I cannot. I have no power here. They own everything. They own me. But if you are real, if you are stronger than them, than their packs, than their demons, then please. I was weeping now. Fully. My whole body shaking with it, snot and tears running down my face unchecked, my hands clawing at the tile as if I could dig through it and escape into the earth. I do not deserve your help. I gasped. I have hated Christians. I have mocked your name. I have believed in nothing but money and power. I am guilty. I am filthy. I know. But she, Fatima, She is innocent. She does not deserve this. Please, Jesus, if you can hear me, if you care, if you are more than a story, then help us. Break this. Break them. Do something." The words poured out, not eloquent, not structured, just raw, desperate. The cry of a man who had finally hit the bottom of everything he thought he was. "I will give you anything," I choked out. "Everything I have, my wealth, my titles, my life, take it all, just, please, stop this, now, right now, please." Silence answered. The room remained dark. The floor remained cold. The palace around me hummed with its usual indifferent sounds. For a moment, nothing changed, and despair so complete I thought it would swallow me whole began to close in. Then, something shifted. Not in the room, but in the air itself, as if the atmosphere had suddenly become charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. The hairs on my arms stood up. My breath caught, and though my eyes were clenched shut, though I was curled on the floor in total darkness, I felt a presence, warm, overwhelming, vast beyond measure, but not crushing, not heavy. Instead, lifting. It moved through the walls like they were paper, through my skin like it was mist, wrapping around me, holding me, and in that moment I knew. Something, someone, had heard me, and was answering. I did not hear it at first. At first there was only my own breathing, ragged, uneven, the sound of my heart pounding against the tile as I lay there, hands pressed to my face, the echo of that name still burning on my tongue. Jesus, if you are real, if you are the God of the impossible, please, please. The air around me hummed, that strange, electric heaviness, like the whole world was holding its breath. My skin prickled, every hair on my body standing on end. I felt both very small and very seen, as if an eye older than time itself had turned and fixed its gaze directly on me, on this disgusting heap of a man in a storage room. And then, cutting through that charged silence, came a sound that ripped me out of myself. A scream. Not hers. His. At first it was just a strangled shout, muffled by walls and doors, but it swelled, in an instant, into a roar of pure, animal terror. A sound I had never heard from another human being. Not in war reports, not in torture videos, nothing. It was the voice of a man whose soul had just collided with something it could not comprehend. "No! No! Ah! My eyes! My eyes!" The words knifed through the air, high, broken, full of agony. For a split second my mind refused to process it. Malik? My cousin, whose voice I had only ever known as smooth, mocking, amused, now shredded, climbing in pitch until it lost all dignity, all composure. Another scream followed, hoarser, desperate. "Stop! Make it stop! Fire! It's burning! It's burning me!" Fire. My body moved before my thoughts could catch up. I lurched to my feet, almost slipping on my own sweat and tears on the tile. My hand shot for the lock, fingers fumbling, slick. I twisted it, wrenched the door open so hard it hit the wall with a crack. The corridor outside seemed to tilt around me, sound rushing in from all sides. "My eyes!" Malik howled again, closer now, right beyond our bedroom door. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" I ran, my bare feet slapped against the polished floor. The world a blur of cream walls and gold edges streaking past. The closer I got to the bedroom, the hotter the air became. Not like normal heat, not like the desert or a sauna, but a dry, fierce, impossible heat that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. A heat that felt alive. The guard who had been posted near our door was gone, vanished, or fled. I did not know. The hallway was empty, except for the echo of Malik's screams and a low, indescribable roar that was not sound, but something my soul heard. I reached the door, my hand closed on the handle. It was warm, almost too warm to touch, as if on the other side a furnace had been lit. For a heartbeat, fear stabbed through me. Some primitive part of me whispered, "Do not open it. Whatever is in there is not for you." But my wife was in that room. I threw the door open. Light hit me like a physical blow. It was not the light of lamps, or chandeliers, or even the midday sun on polished marble. It was white, but not empty, dense, alive with motion like the heart of a flame. It filled the room, boiling the shadows out of every corner. My eyes slammed shut on instinct, pain lancing through them, yet even through my closed lids I could see it, feel it. a brilliance that had no need of physical sight to be known. Heat rolled over me in waves, but it did not burn my skin. It pressed against me, testing. And then, almost like a hand, it passed by, around, as if recognizing me, marking me, but not consuming. Over the roar of that living light, Malik's screams hit another pitch. I forced my eyes, squinting, slitted, open, and I saw him. My cousin was on the floor, not the confident, lounging prince I knew, but a crumpled, twitching thing. He had fallen backward, his heels digging into the carpet as he tried to push himself away from the bed, away from the source of that impossible radiance. His arms were thrown up in front of his face, sleeves singed at the edges, like he was shielding himself from a blast furnace. His eyes? I could not see them clearly through his fingers, but dark streaks ran down his cheeks. Tears, or something else. He clawed at his own face as if trying to rip it off. "Don't look at me!" he shrieked, the words half words, half sounds. "Make it stop! Make it stop! I'm burning! I'm burning!" He was facing the bed. I turned, and between him and my wife stood him. At first all I could see was light, a column, a torrent, a waterfall of fire and snow and sun all braided together. It had form, but not like ours. More and yet perfectly human. Tall, impossibly tall and yet not too tall for the room. White like no cloth I had ever seen. White that contained every color. A robe that seemed woven from the light itself. Every fold burned, and yet did not consume. Where his feet touched the floor, the carpet did not char, but the air shuddered, like the space around him could barely contain his presence. I could not see his face, not at first, not fully. It was too bright, too pure. My eyes, used to gold, to polished marble, to chandeliers, had no language for this. There was no softness in that light, yet there was no cruelty, only a fierce, absolute, unstoppable holiness. Like standing at the edge of a star that had chosen not to annihilate you. I felt small, smaller than dust, and yet, for the first time in my life, I did not feel worthless. His stance was simple. He was standing between Malik and the bed, between that screaming, squirming man, and the woman clutching the covers behind him. Fatima's form shook. I could see only a glimpse of her, eyes wide, body pressed against the headboard, but nothing, no sound. No movement, could touch her, because he stood there, a wall of living fire. He did not move toward Malik. He did not raise a hand, did not speak a word to him. He simply existed, and that existence was a verdict. The heat in the room intensified every time Malik tried to look up. Every time his body instinctively fought to see what faced him. He would let his arms fall a fraction, and then scream as if knives of light were stabbing straight through his skull, clutching his face again. Rolling to his side, scraping at the floor, trying to find a place where the presence did not touch him. "There is fire! Fire!" he babbled, voice cracking. "He's burning me! I can't see! My eyes!" I realized then, with a shock that cut through my own awe, that the light was not the same for all of us. For me, and for Fatima, it was blinding. Yes, overwhelming, but not destructive. It seared, revealing every lie, every secret, but it did not scorch our flesh. For him, it was judgment, like the core of the sun poured straight into his soul, exposing every cruelty, every secret act done in darkness, every scream he had ever silenced with money and threats, now turned back on him like mirrors of fire. He scrambled to his knees, then to his feet, stumbling, half blind, hands still clamped over his eyes. He backed away from the bed, from that figure of light, bumping into furniture, knocking over a chair, his once perfect composure shattered beyond recognition. He looked like a madman, a beggar, all princely dignity scorched off him in seconds. The elder who had overseen this abomination stood frozen in the doorway, his face bleached of color. He stared at the scene, at Malik screaming, at the blazing figure in front of the bed, and his lips moved soundlessly, mouthing prayers that had suddenly turned to dust in his mouth. He took one step forward, then another, as if to intervene. Then the heat rolled toward him, and he stopped, rooted to the spot, trembling. The figure did not even turn toward him. He stood, unshakable, like a lion planted between his prey and the hunter. A line of fire had been drawn in the room, and no one, not Malik, not the elder, not the unseen powers behind them, could cross it. Out! The word was not spoken aloud. Not that I could hear, yet it slammed through the air like thunder, not in my ears, but in my chest, in my bones. Every cell in me vibrated with it, a single, sovereign command. Malik heard it, whether his ears did or not. I cannot say, but something in him reacted as if whipped. He lurched to his feet again, blindly groping for the door, still shrieking, "Don't look at me! Don't look at me!" As if the very gaze of that blazing figure were worse than any torture ever devised. He crashed into the wall, bounced off, hands skidding, then found the doorway by some miracle. He practically ran into the elder, knocking him aside, and fled down the corridor, stumbling, hands clawing at his own face. His screams trailed behind him, echoing through the palace. My eyes! My eyes! Growing fainter as he staggered away, leaving behind a trail of terror that clung to the walls. The elder hesitated only a second longer, eyes huge. Then he too turned and fled, robes tangling around his legs as he hurried after Malik. The door to our wing remained wide open. For the first time in my life I saw those men retreat from me, not out of deference, but out of sheer supernatural fear. And suddenly, the room was quiet. The heat subsided. Not completely, but enough that I could breathe without gasping. The roaring in my soul softened, became something else, deeper, like the low, steady purr of a great lion who has just driven off a threat and now stands guard. I stood there in the doorway, fingers gripping the frame, my body shaking so hard the wood rattled under my hands. My eyes, still watering, slowly adjusted. The blinding radiance seemed to fold in, condense, not leaving, but focusing. He turned. The figure between the bed and the chaos turned toward me. And in that moment, every fear I had ever carried, every terror that had once ruled me, fled like shadows before the sunrise. His face, how can I speak of his face without breaking it, without reducing it to something small and cheap? It was like looking into the center of love and power at the same time. Features I could recognize, human, yet more real than any human face I had ever seen. Eyes like fire and water together, burning and soothing, seeing everything, absolutely everything, and yet, not condemning me. When his gaze met mine, my knees buckled again, but this time not from despair, from something else, something I had never known, a mixture of awe, terror, and an overwhelming sense of being known, utterly, completely, and yet, not rejected. I expected to be exposed, flayed, judged on the spot, for all the hatred, all the arrogance, all the times I had spat on his name in my heart, all the ways I had used power to crush the weak. I expected a sword, or a word that would erase me. Instead, peace hit me like a wave. It crashed over me, through me, filling every crack that had been carved by years of pride and fear. My heartbeat, which had been a wild, panicked drum, slowed, settled, my breathing evened, the weight on my chest, centuries of family expectation. Demonic covenants heavier than stone, lifted, not gradually, but as if a massive hand had reached into my ribcage and torn them out in one decisive motion. The room, which had felt like a furnace moments before, now felt safe. I realized, with a shock that brought tears streaming anew, that for the first time since I was a child, I was not afraid. He stepped toward me. One step. Two. The light around him did not scorch. It warmed, like standing in perfect sunlight after a lifetime under fluorescent bulbs. Each step he took, memories shattered, lies dissolved. Chains I had not even known were wrapped around my soul, fell away with the clink of glass breaking on stone. When he was close enough that I could feel his presence like a physical force, he spoke. This time, I heard it with my ears. You called me. His voice was unlike any sound I had ever known. Deep, gentle, terrifying in its tenderness. It carried authority that made the decrees of kings sound like children playing, yet it was soft enough to wrap itself around my wounds without hurting them. I am here. The words hit me harder than any slap, harder than any command from any elder. They went straight past my intellect, past my defenses, into the core of who I was, the frightened boy who had watched cruelty go unpunished, the proud man who had hidden his fear behind jets and titles, the broken husband curled on a storage room floor. You called me. I am here. I fell. Not because he pushed me, not because the heat was too much, but because my legs simply could not hold the enormity of what stood before me. I dropped to my knees, hands splayed on the carpet, head bowing of its own accord, not in the forced submission I had given the elders, but in a willing surrender that poured out of me like water from a shattered jar. Tears blurred my vision, but I did not care. I could not look away from him, even through the haze. The very fact that I still existed, that I could kneel and see and breathe in that presence, was a miracle beyond any I had ever imagined. Lord. The word slipped from my lips without thought, without training. It was simply the only word that made sense. Behind him, over his shoulder, I saw Fatima. Her eyes were wide, shining with tears, but not of terror now. Her face, though pale, was unhurt, untouched. She clutched the covers around her, but there was no stain of violation on her, only the stunned, radiant shock of someone who had been pulled back from the very edge of an abyss by hands she could not see, until now. He had stood between her and the darkness. He had answered a prayer snarled in tears and unbelief. He had come into a Saudi prince's bedroom, into a house built on blood and fear, and drawn a line the clan could not cross. And now, he stood in front of me. You called me. I am here. I did not know how long I knelt there. Time had dissolved into light, into the sound of my own heartbeat slowly calming under the weight of his gaze. Fatima's quiet sobs behind him softened, turned from terror to something like wonder. The world outside that room, the elders, the clan, the palace, all of it felt far away, small, like toys scattered on the floor of a child's room. Then, gently, without words, I felt it. Go. Not as a command barked by a general, but as an open door, as if he had already cleared the path, as if staying would be the only foolish choice left. I looked at him, at that impossible face, and for a moment panic flickered. Leave? How? Where? They own everything. Every gate. Every road. Every plane. But even as the questions rose, they crumbled, because the presence in front of me was larger than every map I had ever memorized, every security plan, every royal decree. He did not have to say, I will be with you. I felt it in my bones. I turned toward Fatima. My knees protested as I pushed myself up from the floor. I stumbled the few steps to the bed. She looked at me, eyes huge, glistening in the afterglow of that light. For a heartbeat, we simply stared at each other, two people whose entire world had been shattered and remade in the space of minutes. Come, I whispered, my voice hoarse, raw, but steady in a way it had never been. We're leaving, now. She blinked, once, twice, as if trying to wake from a dream. Leaving, she repeated, the word fragile on her lips. Where? How? Omar, they will do nothing, I said. And as I spoke, I realized I believed it, truly, for the first time. Not tonight, not to us, not while he is here. I reached out my hand. She hesitated only a fraction of a second, then placed her hand in mine. Her fingers were cold, trembling, but they closed around mine with a grip that surprised me. Strength flowing through a woman who had just stared hell in the face and seen it retreat. We did not pack. There was nothing to pack that mattered. The closets full of designer clothes, the drawers of jewelry, the safes with watches that cost more than houses. All of it suddenly meant less than the breath in our lungs. I grabbed the nearest cloak for her, a simple black abaya hanging on the chair, pulled it around her shoulders. She slid her feet into the first pair of shoes she could find. I stepped into sandals, still shirtless under my robe. None of it important. I glanced back toward him. He stood as he had, between the bed and the rest of the room. But the blinding intensity had softened. Not gone, just focused, as if he were folding himself so our fragile bodies could bear it. His eyes met mine again, and without speaking, he gave permission, a silent nod that said, yes, go. The way is open. We stepped out of the bedroom. The corridor that had moments ago felt like the throat of a beast now lay before us. Still, quiet, lit by the same soft lamps, yet different in a way I cannot explain. The air felt parted, like water after a ship has cut through. The echoes of Malik's screams had faded into memory, leaving behind a silence so deep it hummed. My security should have been there. The guard who always stood near our door, the rotating patrols, the invisible eyes of cameras tucked into corners. But as we stepped into the hallway, no one moved. The cameras seemed like dead insects, glassy, blind. I half expected an alarm to shriek, radios to crackle, footsteps to thunder toward us. Nothing. We walked. Each step felt impossible, like a miracle on its own. My mind raced ahead, expecting at any moment a shout, a hand on my shoulder, a command to stop. But the only sound was the soft brush of our feet on the carpet. Fatima's breathing beside me, the faint, distant hum of air conditioning. We turned a corner. A maid stood there, a young woman carrying a tray, frozen mid-motion as if someone had pressed pause on her life. Her eyes were open, staring at the wall in front of her. But as we passed, no flicker of recognition crossed her face. It was as if we were ghosts. Or she was. We moved within arm's reach. And she did not turn, did not blink. My heart hammered, half fear, half awe. Another corner. 2 guards at a junction, rifles slung under their jackets. Their backs were straight, faces serious, eyes fixed somewhere above us. Beyond us. We walked right toward them. Every instinct screamed to change course, to find another way. But inside, that quiet assurance pressed. Go. Just go. We passed between them. So close I could have reached out and touched the badge on one man's chest. His gaze did not shift, did not drop to us. His jaw clenched rhythmically, the slow grind of a man half bored, half tired, completely unaware that the prince he was supposedly protecting was walking past him in plain sight, without an escort, with his wife in tow. It was like a veil hung between us and the rest of the world. We were here, and yet, not seen, not in the way that mattered. At one point, further down, I saw them, 2 of the elders from the Majlis, including the one who had pronounced my sentence. They were seated in a small side lounge, cups of tea before them, speaking in low, urgent tones, their brows furrowed, hands moving as they argued about something I could not hear. Perhaps Malik's madness, perhaps how to contain whatever rumor would spread. We had to pass right by the open doorway. My heart climbed into my throat. Reflex made me slow, turn my face away, but a strange courage rose in me. Not the reckless bravado of a prince used to getting his way, but the quiet boldness of a man who had just seen lions flee. I turned my head and looked in. For the first time in my life, I looked at them, without fear. They did not look back. Their eyes slid over the doorway once, twice, as they gestured. But if their gazes touched us, they did not register. Their conversation did not pause. Their faces did not change. It was as if we were invisible, as if someone's hand covered their eyes at the exact angle that would have met ours. We kept moving. Every door we passed, every camera, every guard station, every familiar turn of the palace corridors that had once felt like a maze designed to protect me, now became part of a corridor of exodus. I was walking out of Egypt, out of a land that had owned my body and soul for decades, into a wilderness I did not understand, with nothing but the hand of my wife in mine, and the invisible presence at my back. We reached a service stairwell, one I had rarely used. I shoved the door open, the metal cool under my palm. We descended quickly, the echo of our footsteps swallowed by the concrete. No alarms, no shouts. At the bottom, another door, another hallway, and then, the side entrance to the courtyard. Not the grand gate where my convoys lined up, where foreign delegations entered beneath high arches. This was smaller, for staff, deliveries, the underbelly of the palace machine. 2 guards stood there, one smoking, the other scrolling on his phone. Their faces were lit by blue light, bored, distracted. We walked straight toward them. Every step was a dare, a test of whether what had happened upstairs extended this far. My grip on Fatima's hand tightened. I felt her squeeze back, trembling, but no longer from the same helpless fear. There was something else in it now, trust, desperate, fragile, but real. We reached the door. The guards did not move. One blew out a stream of smoke, the haze drifting past my face without a flinch from him. I pulled the door open. The cool night air rushed in, smelling of sand and distant city lights. Not until we were halfway through did one of them shift. He scratched his neck, glanced vaguely in our direction, but his eyes slid past us, unfocused, as if he were looking right through us at something on the far wall. Then he returned to his screen, oblivious. We stepped into the night. The sky above was a deep, velvet black scattered with stars. The courtyard lights glowed softly, The fountains murmured. The same scene I had walked through 1,000 times. But tonight, it felt like stepping into a new world. The air tasted different, cleaner, sharper, like the first breath after being underwater too long. Our cars were lined up to the side, black, gleaming, silent beasts waiting for orders. I did not call a driver. I did not ring for anyone. I yanked open the door of the nearest SUV, motioned for Fatima to get in. She hesitated only long enough to glance back at the palace, at the windows that had once been the frame of her cage, then slid into the seat. I jumped behind the wheel. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition. For a second, the old fear flared. What if they have already locked the gates? What if the tires are disabled? What if… Then the engine roared to life. Deep, steady, familiar. The dashboard lit up. My hand went to the gear shift, muscle memory taking over. We drove, not in a convoy, not with sirens or outriders. Just one black car slipping through the service exit. The gate guard glanced at the monitor, then at something on his desk, never lifting his eyes to see who was in the vehicle that rolled past him into the night. The city lights fell away behind us. I took the road I knew. Then another, turning off the main highway sooner than I normally would, guided not by GPS, not by security protocols, but by an inner tug. Go. Keep going. Out. Away. Soon. The streets thinned, buildings grew shorter, then vanished altogether. The last glow of the city receded in the mirrors. Ahead, only the desert remained, vast, dark, stretching to the horizon like an unrolled scroll of emptiness. I kept driving, the tires humming on the asphalt, my eyes fixed on the narrow beam of headlights cutting through the night. Beside me, Fatima sat silent, her hands clenched in her lap, her hair loose under the hastily thrown shawl. She stared ahead, then at me, then out the window, as if trying to anchor herself to anything solid in this surreal flight. Minutes turned to an hour, maybe more. The fuel gauge ticked down slowly, but I did not care. For the first time in my life, I did not have a destination, only a direction, away. The silence inside the car was heavy, but not oppressive. It was the silence after a storm, the kind where your ears still ring from thunder, but the air smells washed, new. I realized, somewhere between the city and the endless dunes, that my mind was not obsessing over what I had left behind. The palace, the accounts, the businesses, the jets, the influence, all of it still sat where I had abandoned it. It would be seized, redistributed, spun into some official story about my temporary relocation, or medical leave, or perhaps even a scandal crafted to justify my absence. Billions of dollars, generations of accumulated wealth and power, all slipping from my fingers without a signature, without a fight. And I did not miss it. The only thing I could feel was an expanding, impossible sense of freedom. I had walked out of that gilded prison with nothing but the clothes on my back, the woman I loved, and the memory of a man of fire standing in my bedroom. And somehow, I felt richer, more secure, than I ever had surrounded by diamonds and armed guards. I glanced at Fatima. She was crying silently now, tears tracking down her cheeks. Not the hysterical sobs of earlier, but a deep release, every so often. Her lips moved, forming words I could not hear, prayers, thanksgivings. I did not know, but the peace on her face grew with each one. I realized my own lips were moving too. "Thank you," I whispered, over and over. "Thank you. Thank you." The words felt strange, but right, flowing from a well I had never known I possessed. We did not drive straight to safety that night. The journey that followed took time, and carried its own dangers. False identities, contacts who owed me favors, a maze of flights and quiet crossings. I will not give you all the details. Some of them still touch people who could be harmed. But hear this. We made it out. Today, as I speak these words, I am not in a palace. I am not in Riyadh, or Jeddah, or any city that bows to my old name. I live in a small apartment in a European town where winter actually feels cold, where no one recognizes my face on the street, where I stand in line at the grocery store like any other man, a wallet in my pocket instead of an entourage. I drive an old car that sometimes refuses to start in the morning. I make coffee in a kitchen I clean myself. I lock my own front door at night, and the only guard who stands outside is unseen, but more real than any security team I ever had. I am no longer addressed as Your Highness. I am no longer invited to global summits. No one calls me to ask my opinion on oil prices or regional strategies. The world that once orbited around my name has spun on without me, hardly noticing my absence. And yet, I have never, in all my life, been more certain of who I am. I am no longer just Prince Omar bin Khalid Al Saud, high son of a royal house built on sand and blood. I am a son of a different king, a child of a god I once mocked, rescued by a savior I once despised, owned now by a love that does not trade women like cattle, does not bind men with oaths of darkness, does not need gold to prove its power. I wake up in a modest bed, in a small room, with my wife breathing softly beside me, untouched, guarded, free. And sometimes, in the gray light of dawn, when the world is quiet, I feel that presence again, not in blinding fire this time, but in a warmth that fills the space between my ribs. And I hear, not with my ears, but in the deepest place inside, "You called me. I am still here. Listen carefully now. You may not live in a palace. You may not have jets or billions, but chains do not need gold to be chains. Some are made of iron, some of fear, some of addiction, lust, shame. Some are woven from the expectations of family, culture, religion. Some wrap around your wrists in the name of love, some in the name of success. Some sit on your shoulders as titles, medals, promotions, and you proudly show them to the world, without realizing they are shackles. I wore mine in the form of power. In photographs, my life looked perfect, enviable, untouchable. All the while, invisible covenants, demonic agreements made by men long dead, ruled over my marriage bed, my choices, my soul. Maybe your chains look different. A job you cannot leave though it is killing you. A relationship that devours your dignity. Secrets buried so deep you cannot even tell yourself the truth anymore. Maybe you laugh at faith the way I did. Call it weakness. Call it fantasy. While bowing every day to gods of money, status, pleasure, control. Hear this from a man who has bowed to both. There is only one who has ever stepped into the middle of my nightmare, stood between me and the darkness that claimed rights over my life, and said, "No further. He is mine now. She is mine." Only one whose presence made princes scream and elders flee and covenants burn like paper in a furnace. His name is Jesus. You may hate him. You may mock him. You may ignore him, as I did. He is not intimidated. He is not offended. He is patient, but he is not weak. And when you, finally, reach the point where your money, your power, your cleverness, your religion, your philosophy cannot save you, when you are alone on the floor of whatever storage room your life has become, choking on your own shame, if you call, really call, from that raw, broken place where there is no more performance left, he will come. Maybe not with blinding light and visible fire, maybe not in the dramatic way he did for me, but he will come. And when he does, the chains, yes, even the golden ones you have polished and defended, will begin to melt, to fall, one by one. Do not wait as long as I did. Chains come in gold too, and they are just as deadly. Only one can break them.